the same things that I was feeling. And it's kind of hard to determine and identifying what's yours and what's not, because we did a lot of this brain interface and shared experiences. And
in other words, you could be shattering over someone else's trauma through this brain interface.
And they would do that to put fear into other kids, like, this is what's going to happen to you, because we were so close and so bonded, some of us, and they knew that we were very connected. So it's like I could share that experience with somebody, or they laid us on tables sometimes with the brain interface actual hookups to be able to share that. So again, discernment will definitely come into play as a critical resource in your unraveling. And in that ghost protocol that I said, which goes way beyond remote viewing, it's actually like hijacking bodies and piloting bodies. Because if anybody survived the Secret Space program, they know that they have been in hundreds of bodies. We've been in female bodies. We've been in male bodies. They have holographic technology that can change appearances even. We've been age regressed and we've been aged advanced. So, I mean, there's only one funny memory I have of the age regressing. And I just remember I was a little girl. I was really glad to be in a little girl body. And my voice was so raspy and hoarse. It was like I was swearing like a sailor in a little kid's body. And when you come fresh out of that age regressing, your voice is very harsh for hours, but then it wears off after a while. So the movie Spectral also shows people in the lab retaining a part of a spinal cord. They do this because they know that within our stem cells, within our bone marrow, our matter is the most cellular memory in our bone marrow. And that creates like a suspension-like state. And in that movie, then they use that as an anchor point to transfer the rest of the soul matrix and create a body overlaying that, because you have to have some anchoring point or some tethering point with spirit, soul, consciousness to create a new body that will functionally work together and carry that signature. Everybody has their own unique signature to carry that on.
So many jump off points, Jerusah. In talking to you before we did this interview, said, look, we're going to have to zero in on one thing. And of course, what's going to happen, and listeners, I apologize, but there's no other way to do this. We're going to talk about something until we hit a point where we have to make an inconvenient cliffhanger conclusion and then talk more later. There's a lot here, but you wanted to explain to us, Jerusah, quantum access programs. And this is something I haven't broached as a subject on this podcast before. So we got a little bit of your background. Obviously, there's a lot more to be said. What is a quantum access program?
The quantum access programs were all the research that was gathered in all the other programs, basically, to create the mega program, the ultimate program, which they're totally obsessed with, which is the time travel program. So, I mean, you kind of can join all that into the time travel program because it's still ongoing. And within that, the people who are unlocking, they have something on their temples that I just refer to as like time caps. And it feels like some of the stuff is time unlocked, because when I first started unraveling, my temples were the first thing that got hit really hard and unlocked. And it came in like waves. And what that does is it ensured our sanity, because when they threw us out into all these programs, they stretch us out for hundreds of years. What they do, we had a lot of mismanagement, yes, but then we also had some good management, is they put you back together so you're all good back into civilian life before you're put back into civilian life, so that you're still able to function and be able to work on signals of relay, which is what they want, the signals of relay systems at a determined time ahead. So what I have seen in this point, the people that I've contacted with that were part of the quantum access programs, is that they seem to be pincering off certain time loops, interfacing with their past or other selves with minimal side effects. And what that means is, okay, you jumped somewhere from 1984. Now you're in your body here, 2022. And if you cross paths and you interface with that person, say you're just jogging past that person, you share that consciousness, that link, and you pincer off that time loop. So how we jumped and what we did in the past is having an effect now. And what we're doing is we're interfacing with all our past jumps, because we jumped quite a bit. And what they did is, with the super soldier, they stretch you out to every possible limit, mentally, physically, whatnot. It's not just about being physically tough and militant. It's way beyond that. It's like, they're going to kill you. Can you jump out of this body type situation? Whatever they can think of, things like that. So they developed this thing to see who could last longest in the program called Foursquare. And what that was is they tested to see how much consciousness could be stretched out. And can you operate one body, pilot one body with your consciousness, or can you pilot two bodies, three bodies, or the most four bodies with your consciousness? So they found out that some couldn't, and some freaked out about this, but some actually could pilot four different bodies at once. So if you got sent into a mission, of course, it would give you the ultimate strategic advantage to be the consciousness operating in four different bodies. And things that they did in the program were kind of ingenious like that. And the use of masking identity. They even downgraded our DNA to change our identity. The worst was actual plastic surgery or things like that. So we actually preferred and got reliant on the technology instead of having surgical or other means to continue in the time continuum.
Okay. So in your experience, were you able to pilot four bodies or three or two? And can you just zero in on one memory of that concept?
I definitely do. And I don't know where this happened along the line. We were in a bad faction of the secret space program, taken up with people, crafts that were manned, with people in white, with manufactured beings. And that was actually manned by an AI called Marduk Ra. So somewhere along the line, that mismanagement changed. And it's like we got into a faction that was benevolent, where we got to actually have some type of, it was almost like we got to have vengeance, because they let us go into SRA ritual sites, castles, things like that. Areas where there's a lot of rituals, loose energy, that would be too much if it continued, and we would be able to take down those places. So I actually enjoyed doing that quite a bit because it felt like we got some justice when we were doing those things, and we got a lot more freedom being able to do stuff like that on those certain types of missions.
And you'd have multiple bodies on the field in these missions.
Yes, but I believe that our original bodies were kept on the ship.
Okay.
And they also did something called the Centurion program. And what this program did is it gave the foundational basis for a super soldier. And you would be trained going back to medieval times. You'd be trained in the 1500s, the 1600s, the 1700s, the 1800s, the 1900s, and learn every type of combat and warfare possible, because you'd be able to ingrain that into your memory and be able to use it, and they call it out, and it just kind of like layered upon each other to build the combat oriented person that they wanted.
Wow. All right. So,
well, the quantum domain is basically quantum access, space wars, space files. That's just what I call it.
Right. So the quantum access programs are tied to their big overarching time travel mega baby plan, objective, so forth. Now,
Definitely.
Talk about quantum access programs and their connection to underwater bases, black sites, DUMBs, and so forth.
Well, with that, I think they're all connected because the stars in the universe themselves reflect into the water. It's kind of like a mirroring. And so I think they build some of the land bases they build off of the holes, the caverns that were drilled before the antediluvian times. But underneath, the water bases, I think, are built upon the structure of certain star maps and certain star systems to be able to have that overlay easier. And as kids, I think that they tracked us if we were underwater doing those programs with, I don't know what you call these things. I just call them scanner balls. It was the ball that would come from the sky. You'd see it come from like a star, and it would zip into your house, and then it would stop in a doorway, and you'd be paralyzed. Your spine would feel like it's paralyzed in a doorway, and this little ball would open up, and it would just scan your body. And it was like just something that we got used to. And then the ball would leave and zip back up into the sky and go back to where it came from. So the underwater bases are very linked with the constellations, which are intelligences, because it says that the Battle of Sisera, the stars came down and battled on Earth. There's a big interplay with that.
Now, okay, all right, yeah. In your experience, were you in underwater bases that were primarily under the governance of what I'd call alien entities, government, underground or underwater bases, or underwater bases that were under the government of like some of these fallen angels and merfolk?
They started us out in lakes, and those are mainly run by military. And then once you get past the lakes and the lake monsters, whatever crazy things they do with you down there, then they move you out into higher water bases, the Sea of Azov and other things. Montauk's water base, there was a big one underneath there. They were trying to call Cthulhu and other things underneath there. And that base, I just have very short memories of being flooded, because I think that the military came into Montauk and there was like a little war going on the surface, and then the underwater base got flooded. But if you want to hear an experience about stars and our connection to stars, in counseling, when I was talking to Wendy, we unraveled something about the heart and something about the stars. So what I learned from her in that session was that God wants to reveal areas of our hearts that aren't surrendered yet. So what this cult did with me is that they told me that my heart was gone and replaced it with a stone. So I was carrying the stone around and putting it in my pocket. And they had trained me to sing the song, Catch a Falling Star, and put it in your pocket. And if I wanted my heart back. So what I would do is I'd go outside and I'd sing that song, and I'd look up at a certain star. But what I didn't know is that, I was waiting for my heart to return. The heart didn't come back. You were actually calling upon the Eye of Taurus, Aldebaran, and they had already programmed you to do that. So instead of getting your heart back, which is so cruel how they did this, then you would get abducted, in my lab, into Aldebaran. And maybe that was connected to a base or whatnot. But so I had to clear out those secret vows and oaths in my heart because I was so angry. I put the stone in front of my house and I vowed to hurt anybody that tricked me or lied to me again. And a lot of supernatural things happened because of that rock that was there and the ties to it. So, and that also ties in with liberation of our stars. And they got me at a very young age with a lot of star type of programming, and my star being overlorded by evil entities. But also in the house that we grew up on, I put the Antichrist ring that I had also in my pocket, that I was wearing from the ritual, the marriage of the Antichrist at age 5, on train tracks that were behind our house. And I put a piece of tape on it, but God honored that. And I don't know if the ring actually broke because I never found it. But when the train came, there was sparks that flew, and I saw spirits getting moved around. So,
wow.
So it was good that he cleared my heart with that, because I had no idea that I was holding things in my heart like that.
Here's the thing. Star programming is a very real thing. There's a lot of programming done around stars. And it has everything to do with calling, office, destiny, purpose, hijacking of legitimate giftings that God has given. Oh, wow, this is very deep. But, one of the ministry things that we do at Bride is we actually liberate people's stars. Most people don't even know they have a star, or multiple ones. And we do that. And it really brings life into alignment with God's purposes, because the occult hijacks people's stars literally. But then there will also be all this star programming. It's so much there. Okay. Anyway, talking about quantum access programs and the connection. So if I'm going to put this together, right, you said that these are tied to the overarching time travel agenda, and they're processing this agenda in different places, and sea bases would definitely be included in that. Also, black sites and dumbs.
Yeah, I think it's everything that they gathered and collected, and that the Nazis gathered and collected, and what NASA and every other faction that was at Montauk gathered and collected. Because Anunnaki were also at Montauk. There was also CIA and FBI wars at Montauk, and just all kinds of stuff there. So I think that all went into what they just deemed as quantum, like who could handle the quantum domain and realm and keep going in the time continuum, who they basically had a hard time killing, and who survived.
Okay.
What very strange. Go ahead.
No, please finish your thought.
Well, I'll give a brief synopsis, but I do remember the Anunnaki at Montauk, and the strangest thing that I remember from them was that they were literally kidnapping children from Montauk and taking them up into spaceships. And at that point, I realized, like, this is going to be hard to, explain to people. Like, yeah, there's missing children on Earth, but like, how are you going to go find missing children in space on a spaceship? So that's a whole other testimony of how God is concerned and how he actually is involved with that when they do things like that and steal his children and bring them to remote places. So, but they had stuff, these Anunnaki, that were like black suction hoses. And what they did is they put these bands around our necks, and these were frequency bands of some sort that connected to the AI in the building that would keep us locked in the building, whose AI mother computer actually melted once. But the ships that they used and the technology was some type of nanotech that it would look like a garden hose with black oil on it, and they would suction it into the sun to get their energy. It looked like something like the sun, some plasma energy for their ships, but it would expand like the size of a city block. So this type of nanotech was just crazy, in that it could morph and change form so fast. So you didn't want to be infected with this type of black oil nanotech, because the people that did get infected by it, or the adults, soon just got very decrepit, and it affected their minds very fast. And there's a movie called Oats that kind of portrays this visual of these reptilians.
Wow. Okay. Were you one of the kids that the Anunnaki kidnapped into space?
See, I don't think I went on the one ship. I remember holding on to a child's shoe and trying to get them off of the ship. But they had these devices that they use, almost like staffs, that would, it felt like you had a heart attack if they touched you with it. So a lot of kids tried to not let them abduct the kids, but they got repelled by this. But whatever faction I got involved with, I think was part of Mormonism, because the people that I was with were like the White Brotherhood of the Light on my ship, my first initial ship. And they had like a triangle symbol, and they really brainwashed the children. And I remember it was very hard to break from them not breaking into my mind. They show the nosebleeds a lot, because that is a mental, real battle that I've seen many times. My brother used to have narcolepsy with nosebleeds all the time. When you're interfacing with an entity that powerful, you have to shift your eyes, because they'll first control your eyes, so you can't move your eyes. And then that goes into your neck and spinal cord, and then you become paralyzed. So you have to shift your eyes and gain control of that in a circular movement first.
Wow.
But they brainwashed the kids into thinking that they were like queens of certain lands and whatnot. And that's the first time that I actually saw an angel in space outside of a spaceship. And from then I started having moments where I met God, and then angels that I interfaced with, because I just felt like I was like becoming just a cog in the wheel, like a robot at this point. And I knew that wasn't God's destiny and purpose for me, and that was my false future. So the angels that I would speak to gave me choices, and they would say, like, do you want to go, like, say, with this entity, or do you want to be with God, or do you want to serve God? And then my free will would step in, and then it would expand, and that would bring a doorway. And I realized that my captivity got less and less each time that I chose God. And when you honor God, he will honor you.
So even when you were in craft and off planet, and it sounds like you weren't taken by the Anunnaki, you were taken by this white brotherhood connected to Mormonism. Mm-hmm. You were given by God the option to choose him, and his angels were directly involved in those, I guess, choice moments. And even in this world of the secret space program, the more you were choosing God, all on a very super, it's not exactly like you had a local evangelist with the Bible that just went from ship to ship delivering the word of the Lord. Your bondage was loosening.
That's the goodness of God, though, because he knows if you are deep, deep in space or hidden or buried somewhere that nobody can find, he will use anything. I've seen him use things in the woods. I have seen him use animals. I have seen him in space use an angel to communicate with you, to have the opportunity and the option. Because after I would choose him and say, no, I don't want to go with them, and then the gospel would be presented to me. And then it's like I started getting it written in my heart. And the first time I met an angel, I just saw like his robe just had like a little sliver of light open up in it. And it was like corridors of light. It was the coolest thing I ever saw as a kid, because it was just sparkling light that just, I didn't even know where it came from. It just, it was never ending. What was inside of his robe, I just wanted to see more and more of it. But I just had a short window of time with him.
Okay. Well, friends, here's the good news, right? There's a lot of bombs being dropped in this particular podcast, and you can always rewind and watch from the beginning a second time. Praise God for podcasts. Now, here's the thing, Jerusah. Years ago, when God started preparing me for this work, one of the things he started talking to me about, which was too weird for me to just get up on there and start telling people, is he started talking about the people in space. He's like, there's a lot of people off planet, and I have a plan.
That's right.
And it came out of left field, because I was probably trying to talk to God about, upcoming prayer meeting or worship, like something practical. And he started talking to me like he usually does. He went off the reservation, and I'm thinking, what the heck? And then I spent a lot of time meditating that, like, because I was still in that place, if there are people off planet, if there is this world that is just too fantastic for me to believe, how would God possibly work a plan for people off planet? And I love that you're actually describing the nature of that plan. Like there is a plan. He's not planning on, it's already happening. And it's been happening longer than we've known there is a problem. What's the good news is that the more people become aware of this and become, and I'm saying this to my listening audience, like aware that praying into the cosmic sphere is part of our mandate in this generation because of what's happening, the more accelerated the work of heaven becomes. That's the good news. So we have to recognize, and this is part of the reason for this podcast, we're discovering truth. We didn't even know what our assignment sphere was. At least I didn't.
Yeah, he is concerned with what happens in space.
Okay.
Absolutely. It says he hides himself in dark clouds. He knows everything. It's not like somebody just gets lost in time, or they say, oh, we're going to assassinate you in time and, dispose of you, and he'll just lose a person. That doesn't happen. He knows every single thing that goes on. So I really love this 2 scriptures I gave you. I think it was Job 26:14, that he's in the fringes. And he really opened me up to that. He really is in the fringe of the fringe, and that all timelines he can just correct in his heart. And he can take care of anything in time because he's in the time continuum. And I met him in the time continuum. And that's why I'm alive. And then the other scripture I gave you, I can't remember what it was, John 5, I think, about he gives life to whoever he pleases. And I asked him about, all the stuff with the body transfers and whatnot, and even the guilt and shame and condemnation that can come with that. And that's the scripture he gave me for that. But this does even apply to clones, because a lot of people don't even realize that they are clones on Earth. And we're living in a time where, there's not everything here is alive. So once you're written in the book of life, God says that he will give his life to whomever he chooses.
Well, and if we could just take a brief sidebar and talk about clones. There's a few things that